In a world where power is the ultimate currency, a self-made billionaire is about to discover his entire empire was built on a lie. He thought he had erased his ex-wife from his life. But tonight, at the biggest celebration of his career, she's about to remind him that you can't erase the person who owns the very ground you're standing on. The grand ballroom of the Atherton Hotel glittered, a universe of champagne flutes and hushed million-dollar deals. At its center was Ulrich Rowan, CEO of Titan Industries, a man who radiated success. But the real announcement, the one that would shatter the polished veneer of this opulent world, was poised on his lips. Because across the room, watching from the shadows, was his ex-wife, Rosalie Marchmont. The annual Titan Industries Starlight Gala. For most of the city's elite, it was the social event of the season. The name Titan Industries was a brand on her soul, a permanent mark left by her ex-husband, Ulrich Rowan. Theirs had been a storybook romance, or so the magazines had said. Rosalie's family, the Marchmonts, had been old money. Their wealth was rooted in real estate and shrewd investments that spanned generations. When Rosalie fell for Ulrich, her father, a man who could read a balance sheet like a poet reads verse, had been cautious. "He's hungry, Ellie," he'd warned her, his voice a low rumble in his mahogany-paneled study. "Make sure you're not what he's planning to eat." She'd believed in his vision, in the dazzling future he painted with such confident strokes. Her inherited business acumen proving to be as valuable as her capital. She'd managed the company's real estate portfolio, acquiring properties with a foresight that had saved them millions and made them billions. The cracks, when they began to show, were hairline fractures in a seemingly perfect facade. Ulrich's business trips grew longer, his explanations vaguer. She was everything Rosalie was not, overtly flirtatious, brazenly ambitious, and unburdened by the quiet dignity of old money. The divorce was quiet, at Rosalie's insistence. Ulrich, eager to avoid a financial bloodbath that could destabilize Titan, had agreed to a generous settlement. Among them, a portfolio that included the Atherton Hotel, the very venue for tonight's gala. So here she was, standing in a secluded alcove of the grand ballroom, a ghost at her own feast. She'd chosen a deep sapphire gown, a stark contrast to the sea of glittering golds and silvers. He hadn't aged a day, his dark hair still thick, his smile as blindingly white as ever. He was on the verge of acquiring a rival tech firm, a move that would solidify Titan's dominance for the next decade. "Rosalie, my God, is that you?" Rosalie turned to see a familiar face, a man with a kind, weathered smile and a twinkle in his eye. It was Robert Chen, a senior partner at the law firm that had handled her family's affairs for decades. He was one of the few people who knew the true extent of her holdings. "Robert," she said, her voice a little husky. "I'm surprised to see you here at all," he admitted, his gaze flicking towards Ulrich. "Are you sure you're all right?" He knew about the Atherton. Before Rosalie could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. Ulrich and Wednesday were making their way towards it, hand in hand. The moment had arrived. Rosalie felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She hadn't come here to make a scene. She had come to witness, to stand in the wreckage of her past and know that she had survived. She had come to see the culmination of the empire she had helped build, even if her name was no longer on the letterhead. It wasn't just about survival anymore. Ulrich tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the silent, cavernous space. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice smooth and confident, the voice that had once whispered promises of forever in her ear. Rosalie felt a jolt as his gaze seemed to snag on hers for a fraction of a second. There was no recognition, no flicker of surprise. He spoke of the upcoming merger, of the new frontiers they would conquer, of the legacy he was building. "But my greatest success," he said, turning to Wednesday and taking her hand, "has not been in the boardroom." He drew Wednesday closer, his arms circling her waist. Rosalie's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew what was coming. But the reality of it, the public spectacle of it, was a fresh hell. This incredible woman has made me the happiest man in the world, and she has agreed to become my wife." He leaned in and kissed her, a long, passionate kiss designed for maximum effect. A CEO at the pinnacle of his success, his beautiful young fiancée by his side. But Rosalie Marchmont was not drowning. As she watched the man who had taken everything from her, her love, her trust, her years, bask in the adulation of the crowd, a strange calm settled over her. She thought of her father's words, "Make sure you're not what he's planning to eat." He had feasted on her inheritance, on her intellect, on her love, and then discarded the bones. Tonight, Ulrich Rowan was celebrating on what he believed was his own turf. He was standing on the stage of his own triumph in a building he had chosen for its prestige and opulence. He thought he was the master of his universe. Robert Chen was looking at her, his expression a mixture of concern and something else. The chapter was not closing. A new one was indeed beginning. He was a conductor, and this room of power brokers and socialites was his orchestra, playing a symphony of his success. He looked out at the sea of faces, his smile unwavering, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He was assessing the impact of his announcement, gauging the reactions, ensuring that this personal triumph would translate into professional capital. Every moment, every relationship, was a transaction. Wednesday was radiant, her face flushed with a mixture of love and adrenaline. To the world, they were the ultimate power couple, a perfect blend of influence and beauty. To Rosalie, they were a meticulously crafted illusion, a public relations campaign masquerading as a love story. "Did you know they were even engaged? She's stunning, but so young." Robert Chen moved closer to her, his presence a comforting anchor. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible above the din. Rosalie took a deep breath, the scent of expensive perfume and wilting flowers filling her lungs. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready, Robert," she admitted. "The staff is on standby," he informed her. "The hotel manager, Mr. Albright, is waiting for your signal." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the stage. Ulrich was now being swarmed by well-wishers, a king holding court. He was untouchable, invincible, or so he believed. Rosalie's plan had not been born of vengeance, not initially. It had been a defensive measure, a way to protect herself and her assets from the fallout of their divorce. It was no longer just about protecting what was hers. Tonight, Ulrich had not just announced his engagement. And that was a fiction she could no longer abide. She pulled out her phone, a sleek, minimalist device that was a stark contrast to the diamond-encrusted cases so popular in this crowd. With a few taps, she sent a single pre-written message to Mr. Albright, "Proceed." Across the ballroom, a man in an impeccably tailored tuxedo, his silver hair neatly combed, received the message. The music, a lively jazz ensemble that had been playing in the background, faltered and then died completely. The crowd, which had been a cacophony of chatter and laughter, grew quiet. People looked around, their expressions a mixture of confusion and annoyance. Unthinkable. The hotel was known for its seamless service, its flawless execution. He was a man who craved control, and this unexpected interruption was an unwelcome intrusion into his perfectly orchestrated evening. A collective gasp swept through the room, followed by a wave of nervous laughter. For a moment, the only light came from the emergency exit signs and the faint glow of the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But the darkness lasted only for a few seconds. A single spotlight, the same one that had illuminated Ulrich and Wednesday on stage, suddenly flared to life. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Who was she? Rosalie? It couldn't be. What was she doing here? And then a new voice filled the silence. It was calm, professional, and amplified by the hotel's integrated sound system, which had miraculously just come back to life. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the momentary interruption. There is a small technical issue which we are addressing. It was Mr. Albright, the hotel manager. He looked composed, authoritative. However, he continued, his voice resonating with a newfound gravity, "we have a brief, unscheduled announcement to make." The spotlight remained fixed on Rosalie, who stood as still as a statue. Ulrich was now staring at her openly, his confusion rapidly turning to suspicion. His hand tightened on Wednesday's arm, a reflexive gesture of possession. "Tonight's gala is a celebration of Titan Industries," Mr. Albright said, his voice echoing in the silent room, "and the Atherton Hotel is proud to host such a prestigious event." He looked directly at Ulrich, a man he had been deferring to all evening, and his expression was now unreadable, almost cold. A woman whose vision and commitment to excellence have made the Atherton the landmark that it is today. The spotlight on Rosalie seemed to intensify, bathing her in a brilliant, almost celestial light. She felt like an actress on a stage, the leading lady in a drama of her own making. Mr. Albright made a sweeping gesture towards her. It was a vacuum, a void where the air had been sucked out of the room. 200 of the city's most powerful people were frozen in a state of collective shock. A soft, incredulous laugh. His smile was gone, replaced by a mask of disbelief. His face, which had been flushed with triumph, was now a ghastly shade of white. He truly saw her, not as the ghost of his past, but as a living, breathing force that had just hijacked his reality. He'd heard of it, of course, a powerhouse in commercial real estate, notoriously private, almost mythical in its influence. Rosalie finally moved. She was no longer hiding in the shadows. She was bathed in light, the center of a universe that was rapidly reconfiguring itself around her. She took a step forward, out of the alcove and into the main space of the ballroom. The crowd parted for her as if she were royalty, their faces a mixture of awe, confusion, and dawning respect. She was no longer just Ulrich Rowan's ex-wife. She was Rosalie Marchmont, the woman who owned the ground beneath their feet. It was not a smile of triumph or of malice. It was a smile of quiet, unassailable power, the kind of power he had always craved but had never truly possessed. She then turned her attention to the woman standing beside him, the woman who was wearing a ring that had been bought with money that had its roots in the Marchmont family fortune. The fairy tale was crumbling around her, the handsome prince revealed to be a fool, and the castle built on a foundation of lies. She raised her champagne flute, the crystal glinting in the spotlight. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and steady, carrying across the silent room without the need for a microphone. "Welcome," she said, her voice laced with a subtle irony. "To my hotel." The echo of Rosalie's words, "Welcome to my hotel," resonated through the vast ballroom, not as a shout, but as a quiet, seismic shift that cracked the very foundations of the evening. For a long, suspended moment, there was only a cavernous silence, a collective intake of breath from 200 of the city's most influential figures. Then the silence shattered, not into applause, but into a cacophony of sound, a surge of sharp, incredulous whispers, the rustle of silk and wool as bodies shifted, turning towards each other with wide, questioning eyes. The click and glow of smartphones being unlocked became a sound in itself, a digital wildfire as guests frantically searched for the connection between Rosalie Marchmont and the Marchmont Heritage Group. The spotlight felt less like a celebration and more like an accusation. Marchmont. The Marchmont Heritage Group. He knew the name, of course, a quiet, almost mythical giant in commercial real estate, notoriously private, their holdings woven into the very fabric of the city. He'd never once made the connection. He had been so consumed by his own narrative, so blinded by the brilliance of the empire he believed he had built alone, that he had failed to see the name that had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, the bedrock beneath his feet. Then she moved. It was a masterful play. The crowd, a dense sea of black tie and couture, parted for her instinctively, the way water parts for the bow of a ship. She was no longer a ghost from Ulrich's past. She was a revelation. Her path was a direct line to the stage, a slow, deliberate march toward the man who had discarded her. It was a personal reckoning, and everyone in the room had a front row seat. Ulrich watched her approach, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle pulsed in his cheek. Instead, she had just become the headline. "Rosalie," he finally ground out, his voice a low, dangerous growl that was meant to intimidate. "What is the meaning of this?" "I believe Mr. Albright was quite clear," she replied, her voice cool and even, carrying easily in the tense silence. She did not raise it. She didn't need to. Every ear was straining to hear. "I own this hotel." It redefined him. He was not the host, not the master, not the king. He was merely present at her sufferance. The raw insult was too much for Wednesday, her own humiliation, her own terror needed a target, and the woman before her was it. She found her voice, though it was shrill and unsteady. "You have no right." "My dear," she said, her voice softening with a condescension that was far more cutting than any shout. Her eyes flickered to the ostentatious diamond on Wednesday's finger, then back to her face. The humiliation was absolute. The challenge to his authority undeniable. "Get out," he seethed, taking an aggressive step to the edge of the stage, his hands clenching into white-knuckled fists. "This is my event." But Rosalie didn't even flinch. "Mr. Albright," she called out, her voice a model of professional decorum. "Perhaps you could clarify the booking arrangements for Mr. Rowan." He looked down at Ilrich with an expression of polite, professional regret. "Certainly, Ms. Marchmont." He turned back to the microphone, his voice amplified throughout the room, each word a nail in Ilrich's coffin. He lifted a folder from the podium. Ilrich Rowan wasn't just a guest. He was a discount guest. He was at his own coronation on a coupon provided by the ex-wife he had tried to erase. Ilrich's face was a thundercloud of impotent fury. He had been played, outmaneuvered at every turn, publicly and expertly. Rosalie stepped closer to the stage, looking up at him, her expression unreadable. "It's just getting started." She paused, a final, perfectly timed beat. "I believe we have a board meeting for the new acquisition on Monday morning." What was she talking about? "I'll be there, of course," she continued as if discussing the weather. "As a major shareholder in the company you just acquired, I feel it's important I take a more active role in its future." And there it was. The final, devastating blow he never saw coming. It wasn't just about the hotel. While he was planning his gala, his victory party, she had been quietly, ruthlessly buying up a controlling interest in his prize. The rage on Ilrich's face dissolved, replaced by something he hadn't felt since he was a penniless young man with nothing but ambition, raw, chilling fear. He had never once seen her as a strategist, a predator. Then she turned her back on him. She turned her back on the stage, on the wreckage of his life, on the woman who had replaced her, and she walked away. The crowd parted for her again, but this time the awe was mixed with a palpable fear and respect. The rest of the glittering world was just shadows and whispers. The cavernous bedroom of his sterile, modernist mansion was usually filled with the low hum of Market Watch channels or the cheerful chatter of Wednesday making coffee. Today, there was nothing. The sun streaming through the vast, unadorned windows felt intrusive, painfully bright. He felt a throbbing behind his eyes that had nothing to do with champagne and everything to do with the utter, public demolition of his world. It was from the Wall Street Journal. The headline was stark and brutal: Titan's throne shaken, Rowan's ex-wife revealed as landlord and key shareholder in hostile power play. Another more pointedly asked, Rowan's empire, built on Marchmont's foundation. First to his lead counsel, a man whose usual swagger was replaced by a stammering unease. Then to his head of PR, who spoke in funereal tones about damage control and reframing the narrative, hollow phrases that offered no comfort. The investors, the ones he had personally courted and won over with his charisma, were next. Their voices were tight with a new, chilling politeness, their questions sharp. He had built his kingdom on the perception of infallibility. That perception had been shattered. His personal life imploded with equal swiftness. Wednesday emerged from the guest wing, her face puffy from crying, her crimson gala dress from the night before now looking like a cheap costume. Do you know how humiliating that is? Do you think this is about you? Ulrich snapped, the pressure inside him erupting. My entire company, my life's work is on the line because of her. You let me stand on that stage and look like a fool. You told me she was nobody, a relic from your past. The massive diamond on her finger seemed to mock her. The argument was short and ugly, stripping away the last vestiges of their glamorous illusion. The silence in the mansion returned, heavier and more permanent this time. He was alone with the consequences of his own arrogance. While Ulrich's world imploded, Rosalie's expanded with a quiet, deliberate focus. She refused all requests for interviews, letting the facts, as they had been so publicly revealed, speak for themselves. Her power was not in what she said, but in what she owned and what she was now meticulously planning to do. He'll come to the board meeting with an army of lawyers, Robert Chen warned, looking over a stack of corporate bylaws. I'm coming with a better plan. She tapped a section of the blueprints. Ulrich thinks in terms of acquisitions and hostile takeovers. He sees business as a battlefield. I see it as an ecosystem. He wants to conquer. I intend to cultivate. For days, she and a small, trusted team of the country's top financial and logistical analysts dissected the merged companies. Her vision was holistic, integrating the Marchmont Heritage Group's real estate assets with Titan's technological prowess. She wasn't preparing for a fight. She was preparing to govern. The atmosphere in the Titan Industries boardroom on the day of the first meeting was electric with tension. The long, polished table felt like a dueling ground. They had come to witness a soap opera. He looked every inch the cornered predator ready to lash out. Then it was Rosalie's turn. She walked to the head of the table alone, projecting an aura of calm that was more intimidating than any army of lawyers. Gentlemen, she began, her voice even and clear, resonating with an authority that had nothing to do with volume. Mr. Rowan is correct that our duty is to our shareholders, and that is precisely why I am here. What followed was a masterclass in corporate strategy. She did not speak of betrayal or humiliation. She spoke of synergy, of innovation, of sustainable growth. She presented a detailed, data-driven vision for the newly expanded Titan Industries. She dismantled Ulrich's proposed strategy, not with attacks, but with superior logic and more compelling numbers. The board, who had braced for a messy personal war, listened with growing fascination, then dawning respect. They saw a future for the company that was more stable, more ambitious, and ultimately more lucrative. When she finished, the silence in the room was profound. The vote was a mere formality. But his power was gone, his authority subject to the approval of the woman he had tried to destroy. He was a figurehead, forced to sit in his gilded cage and execute a vision that was not his every move overseen by the board that Rosalie now commanded. He was a ghost in his own machine. The culture at Titan changed. The fear-based sycophancy that had defined Ulrich's tenure was replaced by a new energy of innovation and collaboration. Her business acumen, so long suppressed and undervalued, now flourished in the light. She was lauded in the business press as a visionary. One evening, 2 years after the gala, Rosalie stood in her office, the penthouse suite of the Atherton Hotel that she had claimed as the new MHG headquarters. To the new Marchmont Innovation Wing, he said, handing her a glass. The foundation stone was laid today. To the future, Robert, she replied, her smile genuine and relaxed. It showed Ulrich Rowan, grayer and thinner, announcing his retirement from Titan to pursue personal interests. He was a footnote now, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Her victory wasn't in his defeat, but in her own ascent. She hadn't just reclaimed her company, she had reclaimed her life, on her own terms, building something that would last. The past was no longer a wound. It was a foundation. And she, Rosalie Marchmont, was the architect of a beautiful new beginning. Rosalie's story is an incredible tale of betrayal, resilience, and the ultimate reclamation of power. It's a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most formidable. What was your favorite twist in this corporate chess game? If you were captivated by Rosalie's brilliant strategy, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a great story of triumph. Your support means the world and helps us keep bringing these stories to you.